Set in Finland, the movie tells the story of Ramo, a family man who, out of necessity, had to join Vala, a pharmaceutical company of questionable morality. Eventually, he ended up seeing something he wasn't supposed to, and because of that, his wife and daughter paid the price. Driven by his pain, Ramo created a new identity. Rendell, a fearsome vigilante committed to taking down Vala. He already dealt them a hard blow in the past, but there's still plenty of work to do. His revenge is only just beginning. In the following scene, we are told the legend of Kurofuku, a samurai from ancient Japan who strayed from the path. His sword killed more people than any other weapon forged by man. He decimated his own village and even killed his own son. It was then that his katana became as black as his soul. Kuro left this world centuries ago, but his sword remains on display in his hometown as a reminder of what must never happen again. Back in Finland, a young boy is playing in an abandoned warehouse when he witnesses a criminal act. To the world, Christopher Cox is the CEO of Vala, but in the criminal underworld, he's known as Smiley, the big boss. He has just received a shipment from Japan, and instead of thanking those in charge of the task, he orders their executions. Frightened, the boy tries to sneak away quietly, but trips, alerting Smiley. It seems to be the end of the road for the child, or so it appears. Wearing a bulletproof mask and with fists thirsty for blood, the vigilante, Rendell, takes out the gang members in a flash. Hearing the commotion, Smiley guesses it's Rendell, but he'd rather flee for the sake of his shipment. Once clear of threats, Rendell gently wakes the boy, who is frightened by his intimidating appearance. When the child asks if Rendell is a bad guy, the vigilante replies that he is not, but he doesn't see himself as a good guy either. After dropping the boy off at the orphanage where he lives, Rendell continues his mission. The night is still young. It's also a long night for Smiley, who fights in a cage match against a subordinate who cowardly ran away upon seeing Rendell. It's hardly better to face Smiley. To the outside world, he poses as a noble businessman trying to improve the city's quality of life, using his platform to label Rendell a terrorist. In fact, a reporter named Nina points out that the vigilante only attacks Vala's properties, not ordinary citizens. Smiley dodges the question publicly while secretly authorizing his scientists to experiment on people. A new vaccine is on the way. Likewise, Smiley tasked his right-hand woman, Fugu, with opening the shipment from Japan, which turns out to be a large stone with ancient carvings. In search of new recruits, the mob boss shares the story of his grandfather, Edward Cox, the founder of Vala, and a man with direct ties to the Yakuza. He was obsessed with the idea of living forever and moved to the United States believing it could be possible there. Truly an inspiring figure, likely able to convince any aspirant to sacrifice themselves. Literally sacrifice themselves. Once they have the cadaver they need, the scientists inject it with their new vaccine, and, surprise, the dead body gets up. It seems fine at first until a sudden pain takes over, and it starts tearing off its own skin. Fugu ends its misery. Furious, Smiley demands better results from his scientists, reminding them they don't have much left of the original serum. Later on, Rendell intercepts a Vala cargo shipment and does it in grand fashion. To his surprise, there are masked mercenaries waiting inside the truck. One of them stabs him in the back. He fell right into their trap, or so they thought. Suddenly, Rendell is possessed by a female voice and rises again as a female vigilante. Meet Marla, Rendell's other personality, which emerges when he can't go on. The more Smiley sees Rendell, the more obsessed he becomes. He wants to know how he does what he does, whether he injects some sort of drug, and most importantly, if Smiley can somehow gain control over him. During his next public appearance, the mob boss visits the hospital to see the boy from the warehouse, announcing he'll pay for his recovery since the incident occurred on Vala property. The boy, for better or worse, can't remember what happened that night. Nightfall finds Rendell meeting with his best contact, Nina, who tells him about a gangster named Kurika returning to the city. Rendell, rather the man behind the mask, remembers Kurika as the guy who convinced him to join Vala. The moment Kurika sets foot in the city, he's captured by Smiley's goons to be used as a test subject for the new vaccine. After he dies, Kurika comes back to life as though nothing happened. To him, it felt like a brief fainting spell. Convinced by this formula, Smiley prepares to start mass-producing the vaccine in 48 hours. As for Kurika, the mobster decides to kill him the old-fashioned way, throwing him into the water with a weight attached. Nina, who is quietly following them, takes photos of everything. When the camera shutter clicks, Smiley sends his men to handle her. However, it's Rendell who appears instead. Surprisingly, Smiley not only keeps up with him, but manages to pin him down. He tries to crush Rendell's eyes, but fortunately, the police arrive and force Smiley and his goons to escape. Still dazed, the vigilante dives into the water to save Kurika. Marla's voice reminds him that Kurika is one of the bad guys and he should kill him. Nevertheless, Rendell manages to silence that voice and spares Kurika's life. He could be useful later on. With Kurika's help, Rendell makes some improvements to his base of operations, including his own branded merchandise, though it's doubtful any of that will make it to market. Meeting up with Nina, she informs him that Vala has started using its new vaccine, NH25, in third-world countries. It works against certain illnesses, but you have to stay hooked on it like a drug. Otherwise, a certain death awaits. If they start selling NH25 in Finland, it's only a matter of time before everyone is addicted. Meanwhile, Smiley heads back to the hospital to give the boy a little wooden sword. Not just any sword, but a replica of the legendary katana of Kurofuku. That sword supposedly survived the destruction of Hiroshima in 1945. Because of superstition, locals chose to seal the sword inside a large rock made of lava so that no one could wield the blade's demonic power. Suddenly, the memories of what happened in the warehouse come flooding back to the boy, prompting Smiley to silence him for good. By the time Rendell arrives, the child has passed away. He failed him. Consumed by rage, the vigilante heads to his base to arm himself, intending to confront Smiley directly. However, Kurika shows him how hasty that plan is by presenting a photo of Rendell's wife and daughter. As development of NH25 continues, Smiley sees the possibility of bringing his grandfather back as more attainable. Edward Cox lies in a cryogenic chamber, just like Walt Disney. Smiley notices the scientists have prepared a hyper syringe capable of knocking out any individual for 2 hours. It's one thing to revive someone who has been dead for 5 seconds, and a very different matter to do so with someone who has been gone for decades. Following a false lead, Nina sneaks into Vala's headquarters behind Rendell's back. He eventually finds out thanks to Kurika hacking the security cameras. Both of them set off to rescue her in the brand new and fantastic Rendellmobile. Seeing his grandfather for the first time, Smiley admits it's an honor to meet him in person. As a show of respect, he returns the replica of Kuro's sword that once belonged to Edward, who casually destroys it and demands his grandson hand over the real sword. Inside Vala's offices, Nina finds more than enough evidence of the terrible experiments they've carried out. She also comes across Ramo's file, a family man she vaguely recognizes. With the stone in hand, Edward spills his own blood onto it, activating some sort of mechanism. It needs time to open fully, just as the recently resurrected Edward needs time to recover his strength. In the lab, Nina is startled by a sudden noise and ends up knocking over several shelves. Now they know she's there. But Rendell arrives to save her, bravely fighting the guards. They just keep coming, but the vigilante keeps swinging left and right. After a grueling battle, an exhausted Rendell is the last one standing. Then his mind begins to betray him. Marla has returned. Through her, the vigilante appears stronger and more merciless, killing anyone who stands in his way. Smiley is right there, and to get to him, Rendell must defeat Fugu. She proves to be a match for him, to the point of forcing Marla to withdraw. Instead of finishing Rendell off, Fugu grants him the chance to leave. Meanwhile, Smiley witnesses the stone around the sword begin to melt away. At last, Kurofukushu's legendary katana is in his hands. Barely managing to stand, the vigilante makes it to the chamber where Edward is waiting. Rendell doesn't see him as a threat, but Edward stealthily approaches with a knife. Halfway there, he gets disconnected from the machine that was keeping him alive. Seeing his grandfather dead, Smiley blames Rendell without hesitation and plunges the hyper syringe into him. The man behind the mask wakes up in a completely dark place, trapped within his own mind. In reality, Smiley's scientists are about to break his newly formed tar-like mask. Meanwhile, Nina returns to her workplace only to be fired for breaking into Vala's offices. regardless of the evidence she found. Following multiple reports, the police surround Vala headquarters searching for Rendell, and someone emerges to meet them, removing his mask. Turns out it's Karika. Inside his mind, Ramo confronts Marla face to face. She's the fictional heroine his late daughter admired. She symbolizes his child's hope and devotion, which is why she has the power to awaken him. Seeing how Rendell resists the sedative, Smiley decides to up the ante. The vigilante comes to in a cage match, his opponent being Smiley armed with the katana's dark power. Speaking of which, the mobster has just learned that Fugu's real name is Catherine Fuku, Kuro Fuku's great-great-granddaughter. She was only collaborating with Smiley to try to destroy the sword, a disgrace to her family and a power too immense for anyone to wield. Smiley laughs off her motives and redirects his attention to Rendell, ready to finish him off once and for all. When the vigilante is cornered, Marla steps in and evens the odds, until the sword touches her again. In his consciousness, Ramo hears Marla blaming him for the deaths of his wife and daughter. He was supposed to protect them. Then Rendell himself finishes off Ramo, reclaiming control of his body. Powered by pain, the vigilante confronts the mob boss with more fury than ever and falls once again to the katana. Finally, Marla asks him to give up, but he doesn't know the meaning of surrender. Upon the katana's destruction, Smiley loses his powers and is at Rendell's mercy. Thus, Smiley earns a one-way ticket to hell. At least he'll have his grandfather there. The gangsters are shocked to see their leader die, and Rendell hands over the katana's remains to Catherine Fuku. After that, the vigilante flees with a bunch of gangsters hot on his trail, back in the fray. If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.